The scent of old incense and candle wax fills St. Augustine's Cathedral. It's a smell I know too well, a smell tangled with betrayal and second chances I never asked for but seized anyway. I sit here in the third pew, hands folded demurely in my lap. My dress is simple, modest navy blue, nothing like the clothes I wore in my first life. 3 rows ahead, my ex-husband Gregory shifts in his seat, his shoulder brushing against my sister Clara's. They think they're being subtle, exchanging glances when Father Thomas pauses for effect during his sermon. Today's topic? The sanctity of marriage, the sin of divorce. Oh, the irony is thick enough to choke on. Beneath the hem of my dress, strapped securely to my ankle, the small, hard weight of the tape recorder presses against my skin. A secret weapon, my secret comfort. Father Thomas's voice booms, echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. Divorce tears at the very fabric of our community, a selfish act that dishonors God's covenant. His eyes sweep the congregation, lingering for a moment on me. I meet his gaze, holding it, letting him see nothing. Just a woman bowed by grief, perhaps. That's the role I play now, but inside, I remember. The memory tastes like copper pennies, sharp and metallic on my tongue. It wasn't that long ago, in another timeline, another me, finding them together, not in some cheap motel, but in our bed. Clara, my own sister, wrapped around Gregory, my husband. The shock felt like ice water in my veins, freezing me on the spot. Then came the whispers, the sideways glances from the very people sitting in these pews today. How I had failed the marriage, how I was unstable, emotional. Father Thomas, Gregory's confidant, preached forgiveness while privately assuring Gregory that the church would support him. My supposed best friend, Margaret, testified to my erratic behavior during the divorce proceedings. It was a swift, brutal character assassination orchestrated by those closest to me. And then, the accident. A rainy Tuesday, leaving the church after a futile plea for understanding from Father Thomas. A slip on the slick stone steps. Or was it a push? I remember the feeling of falling, the sharp crack, the darkness flooding in. Dying felt like betrayal's final bitter kiss. The sermon ends. Organ music swells, grand and imposing. People begin to rise, murmuring polite greetings. And here comes Clara, gliding down the aisle, her face a mask of perfect plastic sympathy. She stops at my pew, her expensive perfume cloying in the air. She takes my hand, her grip surprisingly tight, her nails perfectly manicured. "Evelyn, dear," she says, her voice dripping with false concern. "You seem better this week. The grief counseling must be working." I force a small, fragile smile. It's an expression I've practiced. I let my eyes look distant, maybe a little lost. It seems to satisfy her. Inside, I subtly shift my foot, my finger finding the tiny button on the recorder strapped to my ankle. A faint click, almost imperceptible beneath the organ music. Record. "Thank you, Clara," I whisper, my voice intentionally tremulous. "It's slow progress." "Actually," I add, looking directly into her eyes, watching the flicker of unease behind the practiced compassion. "I was hoping we could talk privately sometime soon. About Gregory." Her smile tightens. Just a fraction, but I see it. Her face, beneath the careful layers of foundation and blush, pales almost imperceptibly. "Oh? About Gregory?" she repeats, trying to sound casual. "Is everything all right?" "I just need some closure, I think," I say, letting a tear tremble on my lower lash. "Perhaps over tea? At your place." I know he lives there now, their place. Clara hesitates for only a second, denying the grieving widow the fragile sister would look bad. "Of course, Evelyn. How about tomorrow afternoon?" "Thank you, Clara. That would mean so much." The next afternoon, I stand on the doorstep of the house that used to be mine. Clara opens the door, ushering me into the foyer. It's been redecorated. Subtly, but I notice. The family photos that once lined the hall table, the ones including me, are gone. Replaced by tastefully framed art prints and, I notice with a cold knot in my stomach, a stack of glossy wedding planning magazines on a side table. My home, scrubbed clean of my existence. "Make yourself comfortable in the living room," Clara says, her voice a little too bright. I'll just put the kettle on. As the sounds of her bustling in the kitchen reach me, I don't head for the living room. Instead, I slip silently down the hall towards Gregory's study. My study once. The door is slightly ajar. Inside, it looks much the same, but tidier, more sterile. His briefcase sits on the desk chair. On the desk itself, beside a sleek new laptop, is a pile of manila folders. Church letterhead catches my eye. St. Augustine's Renovation Fund. My heart gives a little thump, not of fear, but of vindication. Quickly, silently, I pull out my phone, snapping pictures of spreadsheets, bank transfer confirmations, documents showing thousands diverted from the church fund into a private joint account under the names Gregory Thorne and Clara Bellwether. His greed, her complicity, all laid out. I slide the folders back exactly as they were, erase the faint click of my phone's camera from my mind, and turn to leave. Just as I reach the hallway, the front door opens. Gregory. He stops dead, his face draining of color as he sees me emerging from the direction of his office. Evelyn, what are you doing here? His voice is sharp, suspicious. Clara comes rushing from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Gregory, you're home early. Evelyn just stopped by for tea, I told you. He cuts her off with a harsh gesture, his eyes fixed on me, narrowed. Did you go into my office? The air crackles. Clara looks frantically between us. The tiny recorder strapped to my ankle continues its silent work, capturing the tremor in Clara's voice, the accusation in Gregory's, the pounding of my own heart, but it's not fear I feel. It's the thrilling hum of anticipation. The first domino is about to fall. They formed such a neat little circle, didn't they? My destroyers. It wasn't just one person, one betrayal. It was a conspiracy of smiling faces and pious pronouncements. First, there was Clara, my younger sister, always living in my shadow, or so she felt. Jealousy was a poison she'd sipped on for years. Jealousy of my marriage, my social standing within the church, even my relationship with our parents. Gregory was her prize, proof she could take what was mine. Then Gregory, my ambitious husband, handsome, charming, and utterly consumed by greed. He married me for my family connections, the veneer of respectability I provided. The church funds were just another opportunity, and I, inconveniently, was becoming suspicious even before I found out about the affair. He needed me gone. Father Thomas, the spiritual leader of St. Augustine's. A man who preached virtue from the pulpit but practiced hypocrisy in private. He was Gregory's golfing buddy, his confidant. He saw Gregory's ambition and hitched his own wagon to it, hoping Gregory's rising influence, fueled by embezzled money, no doubt, would benefit the church and, by extension, himself. Condemning my divorce, siding with Gregory, was simply expedient. Then Margaret, my former best friend. We'd known each other since childhood, but Margaret had secrets, ambitions, and a weakness for powerful men. She was having an affair with Richard, the church board chairman, and feared exposure. Testifying against my character during the divorce bought her silence and favor with the church hierarchy. A simple, devastating transaction of loyalty for security. And finally, Richard Sterling, the chairman of the church board, a pillar of the community on the surface but rotten underneath. He controlled the church's finances, saw the renovation fund as his personal piggy bank, and needed Father Thomas and Gregory compliant to keep the money flowing. My death conveniently removed a potential obstacle. 5 villains, intimately connected, their motives interwoven: jealousy, greed, hypocrisy, fear, corruption. A web spun just for me. I remember it all so clearly now. The fragments of my first life piecing themselves together like shards of broken glass. Clara, visiting more often, her eyes lingering on Gregory, a subtle shift in her body language I'd dismissed as sisterly affection. Gregory, suddenly working late, secretive phone calls, unexplained withdrawals from our joint account that he'd waved away as business expenses. Father Thomas, pulling me aside after service, urging me to be a more supportive wife, subtly blaming me for Gregory's apparent stress. Margaret becoming distant, offering vague warnings about Gregory's ambition, while simultaneously feeding him information about my anxieties, my insecurities. Richard at church functions, always observing, his smile never quite reaching his eyes, especially when the renovation fund was discussed. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Anonymous concerns about my mental state surfaced, originating, I now suspect, from Margaret, amplified by Clara. Father Thomas provided counseling records, breaching all confidentiality, of course, painting me as emotionally volatile. Gregory played the victim, the long-suffering husband. The church community, guided by their leaders, closed ranks. I was isolated, condemned. And the accident. It happened on the church steps, slippery with rain. I was leaving after another humiliating meeting with Father Thomas, where he'd essentially told me to accept the divorce quietly for the good of the community. I remember turning, feeling a sudden hard pressure on my back. Not a violent shove, more like a firm, deliberate push. Losing my balance, the sickening lurch, the world tilting. Gregory had been standing nearby, under the portico, watching me leave. Had he followed me out? Had he? The memory cuts off there, dissolving into pain and darkness. It wasn't an accident. I know it wasn't. Now, in my small, sparsely furnished apartment, the air smells of stale coffee and determination. The walls aren't decorated with art, but with evidence. Photos of Gregory and Clara looking far too comfortable long before our divorce. Bank statements showing the steady siphoning of the renovation fund. Transcripts of hushed phone calls, painstakingly pieced together from fragmented recordings I started making before the accident when my suspicions first began. And newer recordings since my return. Conversations snagged here and there, whispers at church events, Clara's nervous chatter, Gregory's curt dismissals. Connecting strings crisscross the wall, linking faces to dates, transactions to whispered conversations. Father Thomas's private confessions, shared with Gregory, noted down breaches of trust that would make the congregation gasp. My revenge calendar hangs beside the window, dates marked, steps planned. This isn't just about getting even. It's about dismantling their world, brick by hypocritical brick. Tonight is the annual St. Augustine's fundraising gala, a glittering affair held in the church's main hall designed to encourage generous donations, ostensibly for community outreach and, ironically, the perpetually delayed renovations. I volunteered to help serve drinks. It's the perfect vantage point. Anonymous, unobtrusive. I drift through the crowd, offering champagne and polite smiles, my eyes and ears open. There's Richard Sterling holding court near the donation table, expansive gestures, booming laugh. But his eyes dart nervously towards Father Thomas, who stands alone by the altar, looking unusually pale. A moment later, Richard corners the priest, pulling him into the shadows near the choir loft. I edge closer, pretending to tidy a tray of glasses. Their voices are low, tense. Missing funds. Auditors asking questions. Need to be careful, Richard hisses. Father Thomas murmurs something placating, but his hand trembles as he gestures. Margaret is here too, dripping in jewels that look suspiciously expensive for her salary as a church administrator. She's laughing too loudly at something a board member says, but her eyes keep scanning the room. When they meet mine, she flinches, looking away quickly, busying herself with a canapé, playing the part of someone with nothing to hide and failing miserably. And then there are Clara and Gregory, the happy couple, or soon to be. Clara clings to his arm, possessive, proprietary. Her smile is dazzling, but her eyes follow Gregory's every move. He seems distracted, nodding absently at well-wishers, his gaze sweeping the room, occasionally landing on me with a flicker of, what? Annoyance? Suspicion. He leans down, whispers something in Clara's ear. She laughs, a brittle sound, and tightens her grip on his arm. They look picture perfect, a portrait of future bliss built on lies and theft. The gala winds down. Guests begin to depart, leaving behind the scent of perfume, cigars, and unease. As I help clear glasses near the main entrance, Father Thomas approaches me. He waits until the last few guests have drifted out into the night. The cavernous hall feels suddenly cold, imposing. "Evelyn?" he says, his voice barely above a whisper. He steps closer, his cologne something heavy and spiced, almost suffocating. "A word, please. In the confessional?" My heart gives a jolt. The confessional? He gestures towards the small, dark wooden booth tucked away in a side chapel. "I know what you're doing," he murmurs, his eyes avoiding mine, fixed somewhere over my shoulder. The tremor I saw earlier is back, in his voice this time. trying to stir up trouble, digging into things that don't concern you. He leans closer still, his voice dropping further. God sees everything, Evelyn. Everything, even second chances. Is it a threat? A warning? Has he figured out more than I thought? The recorder in my purse, activated moments ago when he first approached, silently captures the faint tremble in his voice, the underlying panic beneath the pious words. My own voice, when I reply, is calm, quiet. Of course, Father, lead the way. Has he discovered my plan? Or is he just beginning to feel the heat? The air inside the confessional is stale, thick with the ghosts of whispered sins. Father Thomas sits opposite me, hidden behind the dark grill. His voice, when he speaks, is smooth, conciliatory. Evelyn, my child, he begins, the familiar cadence both soothing and sickening. I sense your pain, your confusion since returning to us after your ordeal. The community wants to welcome you back, truly. I want to help you reconcile, find peace within these walls again. He speaks of healing, forgiveness, reintegration. He suggests I need guidance, support. His words are carefully chosen, painting him as the compassionate shepherd guiding a lost lamb. I murmur my thanks, playing the part of the grateful penitent. But as I leave the confessional, stepping back into the shadowed side chapel, I linger near the heavy velvet curtain separating it from the vestry. Voices drift through. Father Thomas and Richard Sterling. Can't have her poking around, Richard is saying, his voice tight with anxiety. The auditors are already sniffing. If she talks... I spoke with her, Father Thomas replies, his tone stripped of its earlier warmth. She seems broken, lost, but still, unpredictable. We need to handle the situation, Richard, before she causes real problems. Perhaps find a way to discredit her further. Ensure no one listens if she does start making accusations. Handle it how? Richard presses. We can't risk another incident. Subtly, Father Thomas says, we bring her closer, keep an eye on her, offer her a role, something seemingly inclusive, control the narrative. The cold stone walls of the church seem to press in on me. He wants to help me reconcile? Liar. Hypocrite. They see me as a problem to be managed, a threat to be neutralized. The betrayal stings, familiar and sharp, but this time it fuels the cold fire within me. A few days later, Richard Sterling approaches me after Sunday service, his expression a careful blend of solemnity and magnanimity. Evelyn, he says, clasping his hands, Father Thomas and I have been discussing how best to support your return to the community. We feel, given your late husband's involvement and your own past dedication, that offering you a place on the church financial committee might be a meaningful step. A path to redemption, if you will. A way to contribute positively. It's exactly what Father Thomas suggested. Bring her closer. Control the narrative. The invitation is reluctant. I can see it in the tightness around his eyes, but it's offered under the guise of Christian charity. Perfect. I lower my gaze, clasping my own hands together as if in humble prayer. Oh, Richard, I breathe, letting my voice waver. I don't know what to say. After everything, are you sure? We believe in forgiveness, Evelyn, he says, puffing up slightly, playing the benevolent patriarch. And in second chances. Thank you, I whisper, managing a grateful, teary smile. I would be honored. I want so much to belong again. So I join the committee. I attend every meeting, dressed in drab grays and browns, my hair pulled back severely. I speak softly, only when spoken to. I appear broken, fragile, clinging to this chance for acceptance like a lifeline. I take meticulous notes, head bowed, nodding deferentially to Richard's pronouncements, and Father Thomas's occasional spiritual guidance on financial matters. They watch me, cautiously at first, then with growing complacency. They see a woman crushed by grief and scandal, grateful for any crumb of acceptance. They don't see the predator hiding in plain sight. My position gives me exactly what I need: access. Excuses to be in the church office, near the filing cabinets, the servers. Late evenings, catching up on meeting minutes. Early mornings, preparing documents. Always with a plausible reason. Richard and Father Thomas become careless, reassured by my meekness. Financial records, invoices for the renovation, bank statements, correspondence. It's all there. Digital files are copied onto encrypted drives hidden in innocuous objects. A pen, a lipstick tube. Physical documents are photographed. The images uploaded to secure cloud storage. Spreadsheets detailing inflated costs. Payments to shell corporations linked back to Richard. Kickbacks disguised as consulting fees for Father Thomas. The embezzlement is blatant, arrogant. Enough money to build a small hospital, funneled away while the church roof leaks and the community programs struggle. The next phase requires precision. Anonymity is key. Using burner email accounts set up months ago, accessed only through public Wi-Fi hotspots far from my neighborhood, I begin to leak the information. Not everything at once. Just enough to raise alarm bells, a spreadsheet showing budget discrepancies sent to a notoriously detail-oriented board member. An altered invoice sent to another known for his rigid ethics. Copies of specific bank transfers mailed using gloves, posted from different mailboxes across the city, to two others who have privately questioned Richard's management style before. Each leak is carefully curated, untraceable back to me. My alibis are meticulously constructed, volunteering at a soup kitchen across town when one email is sent, attending a public lecture when documents are mailed, visiting a sick, fictional relative out of state during another key drop. I am never anywhere near a computer or mailbox when the evidence appears. The fallout is swift. Whispers turn into concerned murmurs, then urgent questions. An emergency church board meeting is called. I'm there, of course, notepad and pen ready, seated unobtrusively at the side table to take the minutes. The atmosphere is electric with tension. Richard Sterling, normally bluff and hearty, is sweating, his face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. Father Thomas sits beside him, pale and tight-lipped, his hands trembling so badly he spills water down his cassock when reaching for his glass. The board members who received the anonymous information lay it out, piece by damning piece. Richard, can you explain these payments to Sterling Holdings? One asks, holding up a bank statement. And this invoice for roofing supplies, Father? It seems significantly higher than market rate. Another presses, looking at Thomas. They turn on each other immediately, frantically trying to deflect blame. Thomas approved all expenditures, Richard blusters, pointing a shaking finger. He assured me everything was above board. Richard managed the accounts directly, Father Thomas counters, his voice cracking. I merely offered spiritual oversight. I trusted his financial acumen. Accusations fly, denials crumble. Panic fills the room. It's beautiful chaos. I keep my head down, scribbling notes, my expression carefully neutral, perhaps tinged with bewildered sadness at witnessing such conflict. Several times they glance towards me, perhaps hoping for a word of support, a confirmation of their version of events. When the most outspoken board member finally turns to me directly, asking, Evelyn, you were on the committee recently. Did you notice any irregularities? I look up, meeting his gaze with wide, troubled eyes. I pause, as if gathering my thoughts, then say softly, It's all very confusing and distressing. Perhaps we should pray for guidance. The suggestion hangs in the air, perfectly pious, perfectly useless. It throws them off balance, derailing the accusations for a moment. Richard glares at me, suspicion warring with fury in his eyes. Father Thomas just looks defeated. The meeting adjourns in disarray, investigations promised, trust shattered. As I gather my notes in the now empty church kitchen, rinsing out coffee cups, Margaret appears in the doorway. She leans against the frame, arms crossed, her usual brittle confidence replaced by a sharp, assessing stare. The harsh fluorescent light catches the anxiety in her eyes. The air smells sharply of lemon cleaner. That was quite a show, Margaret says, her voice low. I turn, feigning surprise. Oh, Margaret, yes, it was upsetting. She pushes herself off the doorframe, taking a step closer. Upsetting? Or exactly what you wanted? Her eyes narrow. I know you're behind this somehow, Evelyn. Leaking those documents. You've changed since you came back. Since the accident. She stops just a few feet away, close enough for me to see the tiny lines of strain around her mouth. What happened to you? Really happened? The recorder in my pocket, switched on the moment she entered the kitchen, captures her suspicious tone, her direct question. Her own secrets hang unspoken in the air between us. How much should I reveal? How much should I let her believe? The game continues. A few days after the disastrous board meeting, Margaret calls me. Her voice is different now, warmer, almost like the old days. Evelyn? It's Margaret. I feel awful about how things ended the other day in the kitchen. I was stressed, as we all were. Can I take you out for coffee? A proper chat, like we used to. A peace offering, or so she wants me to believe. We meet at a small cafe downtown, far from the church's orbit. Margaret fusses, orders me the most expensive pastry, compliments my deliberately drab sweater. Then, leaning forward conspiratorially, she starts talking. About the board meeting fallout, Richard's panic, Father Thomas's crumbling authority. And then, casually, she drops the bomb she came here to deliver. You know, she says, stirring her latte with unnecessary vigor, Clara and Gregory have set a date. For the wedding. June. She watches my face closely, searching for any flicker of pain, jealousy, or hurt. Apparently, it's going to be quite the affair, very exclusive. Clara's so excited, of course. Poor thing. She deserves some happiness after everything. The implication hangs there. After your messy divorce, after your breakdown, after your inconvenient reappearance. I keep my expression carefully neutral, maybe a little wistful. That's nice for them, I murmur, taking a slow sip of my coffee. June. That's soon. Margaret presses on. Yes, well, they feel it's time to move forward, put the past behind them. She pats my hand. And you seem to be doing so well, Evelyn. Truly, it's good to see. But the coffee date isn't the end of it. Within days, whispers start circulating again within the church community. Subtle at first, then more persistent. Evelyn's not well. She's become unstable since the accident, holding grudges, maybe even dangerous. Someone mentions seeing me talking to myself. Someone else twists my quiet demeanor at committee meetings into evidence of dissociation. The source? It takes very little digging, a few carefully worded questions to sympathetic parishioners, to trace it back to Margaret. Spreading poison, trying to preemptively discredit me, just as Father Thomas and Richard planned. Protecting herself. Protecting Richard by painting me as the crazy ex-wife. I decide to play along. I call Margaret a few days later. Margaret, it's Evelyn. Thank you again for the coffee, and thank you for your honesty about the wedding. It helped, actually. To know. I pause, letting out a shaky breath. I was thinking, maybe I should do something to show there are no hard feelings. A small congratulatory party? For Clara and Gregory? Could you help me plan it? I want them to know I truly wish them well. There's a surprised silence on the other end of the line. A party? You want to throw them a party? Margaret sounds incredulous, suspicious. Just something simple, I say quickly. Maybe cocktails and hors d'oeuvres at my place? Just to clear the air. Show everyone I'm moving on. Would you help me? I wouldn't know where to start. I even offer to help her with some of the actual wedding preparations. Addressing invitations, perhaps? Anything to show goodwill. Margaret is cautious, but the idea of me publicly endorsing the union, appearing healed and harmless, is clearly appealing. It fits the narrative she's trying to build. Well, all right, Evelyn, she says slowly. That's very generous of you. Yes, I suppose I could help. She begins cautiously to believe I might actually be broken, maybe even grateful for her friendship. Perfect. Now for the countermove. I already have what I need. From before the accident, during those agonizing months of my marriage falling apart, I sought solace in confession. And sometimes, Father Thomas wasn't available. Sometimes other priests heard confessions. And sometimes, when I was desperate for a friendly ear, I confided in Margaret. Not in the confessional, but in hushed conversations, trusting her as my oldest friend. And she, perhaps emboldened by my vulnerability, confided back. About her loneliness, her frustrations, and about her affair with Richard Sterling, a married man, our church board chairman. I hadn't recorded those conversations back then. But after my rebirth, Remembering those tearful confessions, I made it my business to get proof. It wasn't hard. Margaret, seeking comfort or perhaps just someone to listen without judgment, had repeated some of those same confessions to Father Thomas in the confessional, likely seeking absolution. And Father Thomas, sloppy and arrogant, hadn't always erased the backup tapes he was supposed to destroy. Tapes I'd managed to subtly access and copy during my time helping out in the church office. The irony, using the sanctity of the confessional, the very weapon they used against me, to expose them. I transcribed the relevant sections. Margaret's tearful admissions of her affair with Richard, her guilt, her fear of his wife finding out. I make copies, then, using the same anonymous methods as before. Burner emails, public Wi-Fi, gloves, scattered mailboxes. I orchestrate the delivery. A full transcript to Richard Sterling's wife, Amelia. A woman known for her quiet dignity but also her fierce temper when crossed. Edited excerpts focusing on the affair and Margaret's expressed anxieties about Richard's financial dealings, implying she knew more than she let on about the embezzlement, are sent to key church members and the board, particularly those already suspicious of Richard and now Margaret. For good measure, I accidentally leave a folder containing printouts of emails between Margaret and Richard, innocuous scheduling messages mostly, but proving contact, in the church committee meeting room where it's sure to be found and add fuel to the fire, subtly linking her to the ongoing financial scandal inquiries. The weight of the manila envelopes feels solid, satisfying, as I drop them into different mailboxes across the city. Another set of dominoes pushed. The public fallout is spectacular. Amelia Sterling confronts Margaret in the church courtyard after Sunday service the following week. Voices are raised. Accusations fly. "Home wrecker!" Amelia shrieks, her voice echoing across the stunned silence. "Affair with my husband." The carefully constructed facade of St. Augustine's Harmony shatters. People stare, whisper, pull out phones. Margaret, face white with shock and humiliation, tries to flee, but Amelia blocks her path. Meanwhile, the board members who receive the excerpts about Margaret's anxieties regarding Richard's finances start asking pointed questions. How much did Margaret know about the embezzled funds? What was her level of access to the accounts, given her relationship with the chairman? Suddenly, she's implicated not just in adultery, but potentially in the financial scandal too. Her credibility is destroyed. That evening, my phone rings. It's Margaret. Her voice is barely recognizable, choked with panic and tears. "Evelyn, please, you have to help me." Sobs rack her voice. "Amelia confronted me. Everyone knows. The board is questioning me. Richard won't even speak to me. Everything's falling apart. They think I was involved in the money thing. Please, Evelyn, I need someone to vouch for me. Tell them I didn't know. You know me." I listen calmly, letting her panic wash over me. The recorder app on my phone is active, capturing every desperate plea, every incriminating admission woven between the sobs. "Margaret?" I say, my voice filled with gentle sympathy. "This sounds terrible. Of course, I'll help however I can. But what exactly did you know?" I let the question hang there, twisting the knife just a little. Her desperation is a symphony. Later that night, there's a frantic knocking at my apartment door. I open it to find Clara standing there, mascara streaking her flushed face, her expensive silk blouse rumpled. Rain plasters strands of hair to her cheeks. "Evelyn, can I stay here tonight?" she asks, her voice trembling. "Gregory and I had a fight, a terrible fight, about everything that's happening, the money, Margaret, Father Thomas. He's blaming me." Her designer handbag, looking wildly out of place, slips from her shoulder onto my worn welcome mat. She looks lost, scared. "You're the only one I can trust right now, Evie." Rain taps against the window panes. My sister, the architect of my initial downfall, seeking refuge in my home, trusting me. The irony is exquisite. The opportunity? Perfect. Clara sleeps fitfully on my pull-out couch, surrounded by the unfamiliar scent of my cheaper laundry detergent and the faint lingering aroma of stale coffee. I knew she wouldn't just sleep. Grief and fear make people desperate, and desperation makes them predictable, especially Clara. The next morning, while I'm taking a deliberately long shower, letting the hot water sluice away the imaginary grime of her presence in my space, I hear the faint creak of floorboards outside the bathroom door. Then, silence. Just as I planned. I emerge wrapped in a towel, feigning grogginess. Clara is already dressed, perched nervously on the edge of the couch, scrolling through her phone with a little too much intensity. My laptop sits on the small coffee table exactly where I left it, open. Morning, I murmur, heading towards my bedroom. Help yourself to coffee. She jumps slightly. Oh, morning, Evie, thanks. I close my bedroom door, lean against it, and listen. A few moments of silence, then the soft, hesitant clicks of my laptop keyboard. She's taking the bait. On the screen, I'd left open a draft email addressed to a non-existent lawyer, hinting vaguely at new evidence regarding Gregory's financial misconduct and suspicious circumstances surrounding my accident. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, just enough to pique desperate curiosity, enough to make her panic. And panic she does. A few minutes later, I hear her murmuring into her phone. I slip over to the small recording device hidden inside a defunct smoke detector on the ceiling. Placed there specifically for this anticipated scenario, Clara's voice is a panicked whisper, filtering clearly through the receiver connected to my earpiece. Gregory, it's me. Listen, I think she knows something, more than we thought. Her laptop was open, talking about evidence. The accident. I don't know exactly what, but it looks bad. Yes, that accident. We need to talk. We need to act fast. Before she does something. A pause. No, I don't think she suspects I looked. Meet me later? Okay. Be careful. She hangs up, her breathing shallow. She found the bait, swallowed it whole, and delivered confirmation of their shared guilt right into my hands. Or rather, my recorder. Later that day, Clara makes her excuses and leaves, relief warring with anxiety on her face. I let her go, playing the supportive, slightly clueless sister. That evening, I call her. Clara, just checking in. Are you okay after last night? I ask, my voice full of concern. Oh, yes, Evie, fine. Gregory and I talked things through. She lies smoothly. That's good, I say. Listen, I was thinking. I'm actually seeing someone new. A complete fabrication, of course. It's early days, but it feels good, like I'm finally moving forward. I inject a hopeful, slightly vulnerable tone into my voice. I feel like I'm getting my life back. I let her believe I'm distracted, focused on my own healing, my own future, less of a threat. To cement the illusion, I add, things feel so uncertain right now, with everything going on at the church. It's nice having you close. Here. I fumble slightly as if making a spontaneous decision. Take this. I press a spare key to my apartment into her hand. Just in case you ever need, a safe place. No questions asked. Clara stares at the key, then at me, surprise and maybe a flicker of calculation in her eyes. A key. Access. Information. Evie. Thank you, she murmurs, closing her hand around it. The smell of her expensive jasmine perfume seems to cling to the cheap metal. Trust offered like a weapon. A weapon she thinks is hers to wield, but is actually mine. With Clara feeling she has the upper hand, believing me distracted and trusting, the final phase begins. I use her help planning the imaginary congratulatory party as an excuse to visit their house, my old house, several times. While discussing canapés or guest lists, I execute my most elaborate move yet. Tiny, state-of-the-art listening devices, no bigger than a thumbnail, purchased with funds I now have access to, more on that later, are planted discreetly. One under the lip of the kitchen island where they always have coffee. One inside a decorative vase in the living room. One tucked behind the headboard in their bedroom. One strategically placed near Gregory's desk in the study. Then, I host a small dinner for them at their place. Ostensibly a thank you for Clara's help and a gesture of goodwill. I bring wine, cook a simple meal, play the part of the forgiving, forward-looking woman. They relax in their own environment, reassured by my performance, lubricated by wine. After I leave, the recorders stay active, capturing everything. Their frantic, hushed arguments, Their panic about the police potentially getting involved now that the church board is investigating the finances. Their discussions about the main stash of embezzled money, not in the joint account I photographed, but converted to bearer bonds and hidden in a safe deposit box under a false name. Their plans to access it, skip the country, maybe somewhere without an extradition treaty, right after the wedding, leaving the church, Father Thomas, Richard, and Margaret to take the fall. Every incriminating word, every desperate plan, captured in crystal clear audio. The final anonymous package is prepared. This one isn't going to the church board. It contains selected audio clips. Gregory and Clara discussing the bearer bonds, the offshore accounts, the plan to flee, along with copies of the initial bank statements I photographed, addressed simply to the Financial Crimes Unit of the City Police Department, mailed from a public library computer kiosk 2 towns over. The effect is immediate. Within 48 hours, unmarked police cars are parked outside their house. Detectives go inside. I watch from my car parked down the street, partially hidden by an overgrown hedge. Through the window, I see flashes of their faces. Gregory's rigid with fury and fear, Clara's dissolving into tears. They are questioned separately, the classic police tactic. And just as I anticipated, under pressure they turn on each other. Gregory blaming Clara's recklessness, Clara implicating Gregory as the mastermind. Their carefully constructed world implodes. Later that evening, my phone rings. First Gregory, voice tight with controlled rage, demanding to know what I told the police, hinting darkly at consequences if I don't help him. Then Clara, sobbing hysterically, begging me to be a character witness, asking if I know a good lawyer, pleading that she was manipulated, that she never meant for any of it to happen. I listened to both, my voice calm, sympathetic, non-committal. The recorder app captures it all. Their panic is the final nail in their coffins. And now, the reveal. The part they never saw coming. You see, I wasn't just reborn with memories. My death, the tragic fall of the respectable wife of Gregory Thorne on the steps of St. Augustine's, wasn't just a local scandal. It made national news for a day or two. A human interest story, a church tragedy. The subsequent investigation, fueled by anonymous tips, from my lawyer, acting on instructions I'd prepared before my death, anticipating Gregory might try something, led to a hefty insurance payout and a settlement from the church for negligence. Failure to maintain safe steps, inadequate lighting, the official story. That money, millions, wasn't accessible to Gregory. It was placed into a secure, independently managed trust fund that became active upon my return. Legally, the woman who woke up in the hospital weeks after the fall, claiming amnesia first, then gradually recovering, was Evelyn Thorne, presumed survivor. So, while they saw me living in a modest apartment, playing the broken widow, I was, in fact, independently wealthy. Furthermore, the police investigation into my accident was never officially closed. One detective, a cynical veteran named Miller, never bought the slip and fall narrative. He suspected foul play, especially after Gregory married Clara so quickly. When I regained my memory and contacted him discreetly months ago, providing fragmented recollections and suspicions, carefully curated, of course, he reopened the case quietly. We've been working together, the recordings, the financial documents. I haven't just been collecting them for my revenge. I've been collecting evidence for Detective Miller, and the final piece, the checkmate move they never knew, was on the board. My late grandmother. A formidable woman, devout but deeply distrustful of church bureaucracy, especially Richard Sterling. Her will contained a very specific, very unusual morality clause. She had donated the land St. Augustine's was built on, and several adjoining properties to the church generations ago, but with a condition. If the sitting church leadership, specifically the board chairman and head clergy, were ever found guilty of significant financial corruption or moral turpitude, bringing disrepute upon the church, control of those properties, including the land under the cathedral itself, would revert to her eldest surviving granddaughter, me, a clause dismissed as eccentric, forgotten by most. But my lawyer remembered, and the trustee of that part of the will has been watching the unfolding events with keen interest. My grandmother always played the long game, and now so do I. My revenge isn't just personal. It's about reclaiming my legacy and cleansing the institution my family helped build. The air in the emergency church board meeting room is thick with panic and stale coffee. It's standing room only. Board members, legal counsel, a few senior parishioners who got wind of the crisis. The news is out, or at least parts of it. Financial scandal confirmed. Police investigation underway targeting Gregory and Clara. Rumors of Father Thomas's complicity. Richard's mismanagement. Margaret's affair and potential involvement. It's a toxic soup threatening to boil over. Someone, a portly man named Henderson who always preached fiscal responsibility, wrings his hands. This is a disaster. The press will have a field day. Attendance is already down. Maybe we should cancel Sunday service. Just until this blows over. A murmur of agreement ripples through the room. Hide, wait for the storm to pass. But I clear my throat softly. All eyes turn to me, the quiet widow suddenly speaking up. Cancel service? I ask, my voice gentle but carrying in the tense silence. When our congregation needs guidance and reassurance the most? Shouldn't we face them with honesty? Isn't that what faith teaches us? My suggestion hangs there, deceptively simple, impossibly difficult. Honesty? Now? It throws them into confusion again. Richard Sterling, looking haggard and suddenly old, glares at me. Father Thomas avoids my gaze entirely, staring down at his clasped hands. The tension in the room tightens, like a spring wound too far. But no one can argue against facing the congregation with honesty, not without sounding cowardly or complicit. Reluctantly, they agree. Service will proceed. Father Thomas will address the unfortunate misunderstandings. Sunday morning, St. Augustine's is packed. Not just the usual faithful, but curious onlookers drawn by the scent of scandal. The air hums with nervous energy, whispered speculation. I sit in my usual spot, third pew, calm amidst the storm. Gregory and Clara are conspicuously absent, likely dealing with lawyers. Richard sits stiffly in the front pew reserved for the board, his wife Amelia beside him, radiating icy disdain. Margaret is nowhere to be seen. Father Thomas ascends the pulpit, his face pale, his hands gripping the wooden edges. He clears his throat. My dear brothers and sisters, he begins, his voice trembling slightly. There have been rumors, unfortunate misunderstandings, circulating within our beloved community. He attempts a reassuring smile, but it doesn't reach his eyes. I want to assure you, the leadership of this church is committed to transparency and integrity. He falters, glancing towards the sound booth at the back. And then it happens. Not the booming voice of the priest, but a different sound. A click, a hiss of static, and then a voice. Gregory's voice, rough, angry, captured months ago by the recorder hidden in his study. The bonds are untraceable. Once we cash them out after the wedding, we're gone. Let Thomas and Richard deal with the fallout. A collective gasp ripples through the cathedral. Father Thomas freezes, his face turning ashen. Before he can react, the audio switches. Now it's Clara's voice, tearful, pleading, from the recording of her confession to Father Thomas about the affair. It started before the divorce, Father. I know it was wrong, but I loved him. Gregory said Evelyn was unstable, that the marriage was already over. More gasps, murmurs erupting into shocked cries. People turn, staring at each other, then back at the pulpit where Father Thomas stands, mute, horrified. The audio switches again. This time, it's Father Thomas himself, speaking to Richard in the vestry, captured just days ago. Handle the situation. Discredit her further. Can't risk another incident. And then, the most damning part from a confession Gregory made to Thomas years ago, foolishly recorded and never erased. Just a little push, Father, on the steps. An accident. No one will ever know I helped her slip. Chaos erupts. Shouts, cries of disbelief, accusations hurled towards the front. The stained glass windows cast patterns of red and gold across the shocked faces, shadows dancing like demons. Through it all, I sit perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, my expression serene, vindicated. After what seems like an eternity, the recordings stop. Silence descends, heavy and stunned. Father Thomas stumbles back from the pulpit, guided away by ushers. The service dissolves into pandemonium, and then, one by one, they come to me. As the crowd slowly, numbly begins to filter out, leaving a residue of shock and betrayal in the air. My former tormentors approach, drawn to me like moths to a flame they don't understand. Father Thomas first, his face a mask of desperate piety. Evelyn, this madness, it's not God's path for you. Revenge hardens the heart. There must be forgiveness. Then Margaret, materializing from a side chapel where she must have been hiding, eyes red-rimmed, grasping my arm. Evelyn, please, we can fix this. Together, like old times. We were friends. Tell them it's not true. The things they're saying about me? Richard Sterling lumbers over, his face purple with impotent rage. You did this. You don't understand what you've unleashed. You'll destroy this church. Clara appears, seemingly out of nowhere, tears streaming down her face, clutching at my sleeve. Evie, we're still family, sisters, despite everything. Help me, please help me. Finally, Gregory. He slips through the remaining stragglers, his face cold, voice low and menacing for my ears only. You think you've won? This isn't over. You won't get away with this, Evelyn. I promise you that each word, each plea, each threat is captured by the small recorder still running in my purse. My secret weapon, now serving its final purpose. For Detective Miller, who has just entered quietly through the main doors, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, a warrant held discreetly in his hand. To each of them, to the priest, the friend, the chairman, the sister, the husband, I offer the same response. My gaze is steady, my voice calm, devoid of heat or triumph. Just a simple final verdict. No. No forgiveness, no negotiation, no reconciliation, no mercy, no fear, just no. Detective Miller approaches as Gregory finishes his threat. He nods curtly to me, then addresses Gregory. Gregory Thorne, you need to come with us. The officers move forward. Clara cries out. Richard sputters protests. Father Thomas looks like he might faint. The afternoon light slanting through the stained glass seems brighter now, cleaner. It doesn't feel oppressive anymore. Not to me. As the officers escort my former family, my former friends, my former husband out into the waiting police cars, another figure approaches me through the emptying cathedral. Mr. Abernathy, the elderly, stoic trustee of my grandmother's estate. He carries a worn leather briefcase. He stops before me, clears his throat, and opens the briefcase, revealing copies of my grandmother's will and a sheaf of property transfer documents. Miss Thorne, he says formally, though his eyes hold a glimmer of something like approval. The evidence of corruption is undeniable. The morality clause is now in effect. Control of the properties reverts to you, effective immediately. He gestures towards the remaining board members huddled near the altar. The emergency board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp, they're expecting you to lead it. The weight of his words settles on me. Revenge is complete. The guilty are facing justice. But the responsibility, rebuilding this shattered community, managing the legacy my grandmother entrusted to me, that work is just beginning. The silence in the vast cathedral feels different now, not empty, but waiting. 1 year later. Sunlight streams through the newly repaired stained glass windows of St. Augustine's, the intricate patterns no longer casting ominous shadows, but illuminating the faces of the congregation. The air smells faintly of lemon polish and new beginnings, not old incense and decay. The renovations, stalled for years under Richard's corrupt tenure, are finally complete, paid for with the recovered embezzled funds. A new, younger priest stands at the altar, his sermon focused on community healing and outreach. I sit not in the pews, but on a side chair reserved for the committee heads. I lead the new Transparency Committee, ensuring every dollar donated is accounted for, every decision made openly. The recovered funds that weren't needed for repairs have established a thriving soup kitchen, a job counseling center, and scholarships for underprivileged youth in the area. The church is smaller now, some members having left during the scandal, but it feels healthier, more authentic. My own healing has progressed in parallel. I no longer live in that small, cramped apartment filled with ghosts and conspiracy boards. My home is now a small cottage nestled in the dunes, overlooking the ocean, miles away from the city's noise and the church's lingering memories. The constant rhythm of the waves is a soothing balm. The walls here hold no evidence, only photographs from recent travels. Italy, Costa Rica, the Scottish Highlands, and vibrant abstract paintings I've started creating myself. On my desk lies a letter from the therapist I saw for a few months after the dust settled. It notes my resilience, my progress in processing the trauma, both the original betrayals and the complex emotional aftermath of my revenge. I read it through once, then take it down to the beach as the sun begins to set. I strike a match, hold it to the paper, and watch the words curl and blacken. The ashes drift away on the evening breeze, scattering over the waves. A small ceremony. A release. News from the old life reaches me occasionally, filtered through emails from Detective Miller, now Captain Miller, or clipped articles forwarded by Mr. Abernathy. Gregory and Clara received surprisingly light sentences, community service, served at separate facilities on opposite ends of the state, thanks to their cooperation in implicating others and returning a portion of the stolen funds. Their marriage, unsurprisingly, didn't survive the trial. Father Thomas, defrocked and disgraced, now works as a low-level hospital chaplain under strict supervision, counseling the sick and dying. Richard Sterling, barred for life from holding any position of financial trust and facing mountains of civil lawsuits, lives quietly in near seclusion. Margaret, ever the opportunist, is apparently writing a memoir, positioning herself as a victim swept up in events beyond her control, a tale of redemption. I read these updates with a sense of detachment, a distant echo from a life that no longer feels like mine. I close my laptop, turning my attention back to the sound of the gulls and the smell of the salt air. The present is where I live now. Tonight, my small deck overlooking the ocean is filled with warmth and laughter. New friends, people I've met here, through art classes, beach cleanups, local events. People who know me only as Evelyn, the quiet woman who paints and walks her dog on the beach. We share grilled fish and chilled wine. Conversation flows easily, punctuated by the clink of glasses catching the light of the setting sun. The laughter feels different now. Lighter, genuine, bubbling up from a place of contentment, not calculation. Someone, a kind-faced potter named Sarah, asks casually, "You seem so settled here, Evelyn. What brought you to the coast?" I smile, swirling the wine in my glass. "Oh, I say lightly, my eyes on the horizon where the sky meets the sea. That's a story for another time. And for the first time, I believe it might be. A story, not a weapon." Dawn breaks, painting the sky in soft pastels. I walk alone on the beach, the sand cool and damp between my toes. The dog races ahead, chasing phantom sandpipers. I stoop to pick up shells, admiring their intricate patterns, remnants of lives lived beneath the waves. I find a perfect spiral shell whirled like a miniature galaxy. Holding it to my ear, I hear not the roar of the ocean, but the quiet whisper of the future, full of unknown possibilities. Back in my cottage, tucked away in a simple wooden memory box on a high shelf, sits the tiny digital recorder. My constant companion through the darkness, my tool of justice. It's silent now, its battery long dead. It served its purpose. I don't need it anymore. Standing at the water's edge, facing the rising sun, I whisper a quiet thank you to my past self for her pain, her anger, her strength. Then I turn and walk towards the growing light, leaving only footprints in the wet sand, soon to be washed away by the incoming tide.